There have been a few occasions when I have unfriended, unfollowed, or avoided conversations with friends, colleagues, neighbors, relatives, when it became clear that our views of the world were fundamentally different and irreconcilable, that engaging in conversation or debate would accomplish nothing but frustration. Our tradition makes clear that we should avoid hateful, violent attitudes, overtly racist, bigoted, misinformed, and misinformers should be avoided as well, the evil tongues. But this is not what I'm speaking about. Tonight I'm thinking about the friends, the colleagues, the neighbors who I have stopped talking to because we disagree. And tonight, as we examine our actions from the past year, I'm wondering, what does Judaism say? Whether it's Jewish to unfriend on Facebook or cut off contact when we disagree. Judaism has a term for the cessation of contact, of communication, Herem. When somebody is placed under Herem, Jews are forbidden to teach, to learn from, to employ, to work with or work for, to live with, or even to come within 6 feet of someone who has been placed under Herem. Before the Enlightenment, when Jewish communities were autonomous political entities within larger countries, a sentence of Herem carried a lot of weight. Imagine somebody living in Israel who is forbidden from having any contact with Jewish people. Since the Enlightenment, Herem has become relatively rare and far less onerous. The Talmud identifies a process for cutting someone off, a list of 24 actions that might lead us to declare Herem. A wrongdoer is warned repeatedly. Contact with the Jewish community may be suspended for a brief period. And if lesser ostracizing does not lead to a change in behavior, then Herem is declared, with the sounding of a shofar, no less. And the wrongdoer is cut off from the Jewish community indefinitely. It's a lot more difficult than just clicking unfriend. Underlying and connecting the 24 reasons for Herem is a rabbinical concern for Jewish solidarity. The fear that the actions of an individual may irreconcilably divide or destroy the Jewish community. Moshe Benovitz explains that excommunication was originally a safeguard against the contagion imparted by the Herem victim, but it later became a punishment in its own right. In the Bible, Herem was understood as highly contagious. It was abhorrent, an idea or object that could spread and lead people astray, destroying the community. Fearing the spread and communal destruction, Herem is imposed. And unlike quarantine, for which an end date exists, the period of Herem is indefinite. To safeguard ourselves and our community from rhetoric that is divisive, if not destructive to our community, we too may be tempted to cut off or distance ourselves from views that we fear. Blocking, unfriending, unfollowing, or avoiding family, friends, and neighbors seem less severe than Herem, though the result is the same. We cease communications when the beliefs of people we encounter conflict with our own. Herem was a response born of fear, deployed in extreme circumstances when reasoned debate was no longer possible. How much easier it is to unfriend or avoid people when we disagree. But our tradition emphasizes the importance of debate, even as it recognized the danger of disagreement. Pirkei Avot, a collection of rabbinic teachings compiled around the year 200 of the Common Era, teaches us about good and bad disagreements. The disagreements between the followers of Rabbi Hillel and Shammai are held up as examples of good arguments for the sake of heaven, focused on the pursuit of truth. The Talmud explains that the followers of Hillel were kind and gracious. They listened, they preserved the teachings of Shammai, and they even presented Shammai's position first. It's an understatement to say that disagreement and debate are important in our tradition. The Talmud and Mishnah are filled with countless disagreements between rabbis over interpretation and application of divine will. I'm sure we're all familiar with the punchline, wherever there are two Jews, you will find three opinions. And there's a lot that we can learn from the art of disagreement in our tradition, especially that we can disagree and still be friends and still work together. I've encountered many people with views that are irreconcilably different from my own. It is clear that no amount of listening, learning, or patient dialogue will resolve the divide, and it's tempting to block out the opposing view. In the short term, I will experience peace and not spend time or energy debating a question that will never be resolved, but ignoring or blocking out the differing points of view will not make them go away. Debates about Israel on college campuses offer a meaningful example. My love for Israel is deep and my pride and connection is strong. We teach our children to love and support Israel and any imperfections. We also teach our students to be mensches, to be sensitive and sympathetic to the plight of others. As he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, the great Tzaddik Elie Wiesel shared that he was sensitive to the plight of the Palestinian people. He urged alleviation of their suffering even as he condemned their tactics. Our college students may encounter a compelling but unbalanced or even false anti-Israel narrative portraying Israel as an unjust oppressor and an exploitative aggressor in a way that engenders sympathy and connects the Palestinian people with all other oppressed peoples. I fear that our students will be misled. Even if our students have a deep love for Israel, even if they recognize the truth, even if they are able and prepared to respond to anti-Israel propaganda, I fear that they will be surrounded by poisonous anti-Israel sentiment that crosses into anti-Semitism and leaves Jewish students vulnerable or even targets of attacks. It's what I fear. One instinct is to limit opposing points of view, to deny a forum or cancel a speaker with whom we disagree, especially when we have reason to fear the impact of their point of view. We may reach out to deans and administrators and at best politely question, how can you allow someone with such abhorrent anti-Israel views a forum to speak on campus? But we see now that anti-Israel activists pursue similar tactics, sharing that they feel threatened by pro-Israel speakers and trying to block out people who support Israel. Years ago, while serving a small town college community, a retired professor planned and promoted a community event that included an Israeli-born musician. It was mellow jazz mixed with controversial politics. That's how it was billed. The feature musician was born in Israel to a Jewish family. When I looked him up, the Anti-Defamation League described him as an anti-Semitic author, writer, and musician. I promptly scheduled a meeting with the college president to voice my concerns on behalf of the Jewish community. A wise leader, the president patiently listened before explaining that there was little he could do to stop the event. It was at a venue off campus. But the night of the jazz performance, an award-winning documentary examining the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was screened on campus, sponsored by the college and the local Human Rights Commission. The director of the documentary led a discussion about Israelis and Palestinians working together to overcome their hate. The next day, the local newspaper ran the headline, "More Than Jazz. Controversial Israeli-born musician draws sparse crowd, more attend film on hate." The paper reported that more than 100 community members were part of the screening, while just over a dozen people, including the musician, his entourage, and a van of people from a neighboring town, attended the anti-Israel event. I was afraid of the jazz event, that it could hurt the reputation of Israel and stir up anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiments in the community. Ignoring the event would not have made it go away. Protesting the event would have drawn more attention. There was no way to change the minds of the musician or the retired professor. But with support, in coming together and listening to each other, we pushed past the fears that were limiting us. There were no accusations of cancel culture. We acknowledged and learned about a complex political issue, incorporating many points of view. Judaism makes clear that there are limits to engaging with people who hold different points of view. Our right to exist, to live peacefully, to self-define is sacrosanct. We cannot engage with people who are beyond reason, who deny these rights or who encourage violence or destruction. Such views justify Herem. These are reasons to not engage, to not even listen. But our challenge, especially at a time of significant political and ideological division, is to understand the significance of Herem and to not initiate it too softly. We do not need to agree about everything all the time. And I want to challenge us to examine, to overcome the fears that have led us to cut off people in the past, to reconnect with those we may have unfriended or blocked because we feared our views were different and irreconcilable. The fourth word in the Kol Nidrei chant that Cantor sang so beautifully at the beginning of our service was Herem. In Kol Nidrei is a nullification of any Herem we have declared in the past year, a nullification of anyone we have unfriended or cut off. We read earlier in our Machzor words from Rabbi David Stern. In its emphasis on humility, Kol Nidrei provides a corrective to the toxic certainties of polarized discourse. What if we approached each other with the humility to recognize that our most confident convictions will always be qualified by the limits of our own knowledge and understanding? Kol Nidrei grants us the gift of sacred uncertainty, the chance to begin this new year with a sense of what we do not know rather than a narrow certainty about what we do. Adonai, our God and God of generations past, on this Yom Kippur, may we find the courage, the patience, the wisdom to release each other with the words of Kol Nidrei and the sounding of the shofar. In the year ahead, help us to transcend the polluting contagion of division present in our partisan political culture, that we may listen to each other and hear each other and not fear each other. Even if we never agree, let us be like the disciples of Hillel, kind and gracious in our disagreements, unafraid to disagree, listening with patience that we may overcome our divisions and work together to build a better world. Amen.